The civil unrest surrounding the Dakota Access Oil Pipeline project is escalating to dangerous levels. Law enforcement recently sprayed water on protesters in frigid temperatures, and now the governor is ordering activists to evacuate over concerns of harsh winter conditions. For more on DAPL, we're joined by Ward Churchill, a professor, author, and activist. Welcome, Ward.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
The North Dakota governor issued a mandatory evacuation over weather concerns. That starts on December 5th. Do you suspect protesters will comply?
I doubt it, and even if they were inclined, it would be difficult since the governor, with all of his great concern about inclement weather and the well-being of the people he's planning to evict, many of them from their own land, because of the harshness of the winters up there, waits for the first major blizzard to announce that they suddenly have to move from a winterized encampment about 100 yards south into, well, nothing. They'd have to start over in the midst of the blizzard. But I don't know how many of the viewers here have experienced what a Northern Plains blizzard is like, but it would be tough for them to move even if they desired to.
Now, Ward, you're headed there tomorrow. What's your plan?
Well, I'm going to the responsible officials on the Standing Rock Reservation, and that's whose land we're talking about. This is unceded Indian territory north of Cannonball River as far as the Heart River. Okay, the area over which the Army Corps of Engineers claims jurisdiction is actually treaty land, Lakota land. And see if what, once I'll go to the responsible officials and see if what assistance I can be.
So you're there on an official sort of basis. Do you plan to be on the protest lines as well?
I'm not official. I'll simply provide whatever assistance I can, and that could take a number of forms, and it may simply being another indicate being another body there.
So you do plan to be there at Standing Rock with many of the water protectors?
That's correct. And for that matter, I could probably make good case that I should participate in the action of the vets on the military veterans who are mobilizing in support of Standing Rock at the present time. They have an action plan for the 5th, and I am, of course, a Vietnam veteran. So, you know, there's several different possibilities, and exactly how that plays out, I couldn't tell you at the present time.
There's been a resistance to the pipeline since it was first proposed, but recently have we seen the cause really gain momentum. Why do you think so many waited until this pipeline was 80% done before taking action?
Well, they didn't. There's been actions opposing a pipeline, physical interventions, attempt to block it, for months. They simply haven't been reported, and that's a different thing from them not having happened at all. And a number of those are ongoing at present time. There's some mobilization that's increasing as the pipeline gets nearer to completion. The urgency goes up, but also Standing Rock, the people there who have taken the particular position that they've taken were in no position to take it when the pipeline was being completed in Iowa, say. It's when it came into direct proximity to their territory, would be entering into their territory, going through the unceded territory, disturbing sacred sites and so forth, but ultimately undermining their sovereignty. All right? This is another nation. It has treaties with the United States, and you read Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution, the United States government is not empowered to enter into a treaty with any entity other than another sovereign nation. Once the treaty has been negotiated and ratified, U.S. has formally recognized the other party or parties as being sovereign nations. That's the law.
Has there been a lawsuit filed because of that?
It doesn't alter the nature of it being the law. So the state of South Dakota, for example, would have absolutely no jurisdiction that's defensible with regard to the territory of another country.
Has there been any lawsuits filed due to that?
There are a number of suits in process. I couldn't tell you the nature of all of them. An injunction was filed in U.S. District Court, I believe it was, in Washington, D.C., some time back. That failed, but then Obama thanked the court for its opinion and basically imposed an injunction of his own. Obviously, that is terminal insofar as you're going to have another president here within a couple months. So,
and it appears he is in support of the pipeline, as he does have some money behind that project invested in that.
Wouldn't be any conflict of interest involved in having a financial interest in that which he is going to support here. I understood that to be sort of an illegal thing under U.S. law too, but I'll let U.S. sort of work that one out, I suppose. I'm concerned with the Lakota sovereignty. Okay. For which I would assume that the incoming president has no regard whatsoever. The last one's had a distinctly insufficient regard, but the next harkens to be even worse in that respect. And so far as I can tell, has never heard of a pipeline he didn't like.
Well, that is yet to be seen. Let's talk about the police there. The militarized police has had an especially harsh reaction to protesters at Standing Rock. Why do you think this is so?
Well, you give these boys toys and they're going to play with them, of course, and you've had this massive infusion of military hardware into the police under liberal administrations, I might add, just actually to a greater extent even than the conservative ones, going on under the 1033 program and related programs for a quarter century at this point. I don't know who people thought all this military hardware was going to be aimed at, but newsflash, in case you missed it, the police point their guns at you. All right? But we're missing a piece here, too. You've got security forces that are paid directly by the pipeline company, most specifically an outfit called Tiger Swan. And these are providing the intelligence and so forth, as well as manpower to the police. And it's been argued that, in effect, the private security entities, the contractors, are in charge of the whole operation, and the police are essentially following their dictates. I don't know exactly how one would go about, in the present moment, determining who has done what, but one need not automatically assume when someone gets hit by a so-called rubber bullet, which, by the way, is not rubber at all. It's a hard plastic, and it'll kill you when fired at close range. Whether it was a cop that fired her or one of these guys who is an offload from Delta Force or SEAL teams that are now in the employ of the pipeline company. But they're acting in concert. So you've got a doubled-up military capacity. One's essentially a public entity and accountable in that regard. The other is a sanctioned private entity. It's an industrial army, in effect, special operations chained and highly equipped, an offshoot of the old Blackwater endeavor that made quite an impact in New Orleans. So, you've got a really, really ugly potential on one side, and it's been manifest. I mean, you got a young woman has lost all of the flesh between her elbow and her wrist from being a direct hit with a flashbang grenade. You've got those weapons used. You've got sonic weapons having been used. You've also, as you've mentioned yourself, water cannons sprayed on people in sub-freezing temperatures. So much for the governor's grand worry about hypothermia. Chemical agents that are prohibited under the Geneva Convention for use under warfare. People have been absolutely saturated with them. You've got inhumane conditions of confinement. You've got people who were beaten and otherwise abused while in confinement, held under abysmal conditions, and they're dropping all the charges, incidentally. Now, that used to be called false arrest. You dispense with conduct that's not necessarily criminal, but you enter false charges in order to effect the arrest and end the activity, and then you drop the charges and cut the people loose. Oh, well. No, you can't lawfully, under the United States Constitution, engage in that pattern of activity.
Well, just this week, several protesters did file a class action lawsuit against Morton County and law enforcement agencies who they accuse of illegal use of force, including highly dangerous weaponry. 7 different states have been sending their law enforcement officers to help protect that private pipeline company. So you do have that private security, but you also have 7 different states sending their police officers to North Dakota. So it's been an interesting.
Some of them have at this point been recalled. Ohio and Minnesota, for example, at least around Minneapolis, those cops have been recalled because you had citizen outrage being expressed there. You know, not least, but we never approved expenditure of tax funds in these state jurisdictions for purposes of enforcing whatever it is that's being enforced in a completely separate jurisdiction halfway across the country, and nobody asked us if we approved of the pipeline in general, much less of the commitment of our police power to seeing to it that it goes through.
Just before we let you go, Ward, I do want to ask you, what are your thoughts on the media coverage at Standing Rock?
Well, it's been intermittent at best, although there is increasing coverage.
In a recent Facebook post, the Red Warrior Camp slammed Vice News' negative coverage. They said they were glad they banned the crew from the camp. Have you heard about that?
Like I said, it's been intermittent. It's also been uneven. All right. It's been nothing like the exposure that was given, for example, to what happened in North St. Louis. There's been several other instances around the country where there were confrontations and heavy police response that got far more immediate and sustained coverage than this. It's kind of an out of sight, out of mind, but the sustained nature of it and the escalating nature of it has sort of compelled increasing attention, and the media sort of follows the leader. You know, somebody runs a story, then everybody else has to run a story so they can say they did it. And sometimes it's good, and sometimes the coverage is just lousy.
Well, hopefully our viewers believe that we've got some pretty good coverage. Now that mandatory evacuation does take place December 5th, whether folks there are going to comply with that is yet to be seen. Ward Churchill, thank you so much for joining us.
I got a question.
Yes.
For your viewers, what do you think the county police in North Dakota are going to do with an estimated 8,000 people in that camp?
It's a good question. Everybody can weigh in online at Facebook and on Twitter at WHDT World News. Ward Churchill, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.